Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back to Unfiltered Unspoken. And we are in season two. Happy New Year's. And to kick off our first episode in season two, we have Kimberly Henry, and she has a testimony to share. Kimberly has went through childhood traumas. Both parents had alcohol addictions, which caused abuse. Kimberly was raped. Kimberly also went through traumas with her ex, whom she has a child by, and he had an addiction. And you're going to hear her testimony on how she got out of it. So she went through abuse from childhood to adulthood, and she's finally on her survival stage. So let's bring in Kim. She's going to give us an introduction. And then, of course, our lovely co host, Sid, is going to kick it off.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so grateful to be here. And I am Kimberly. I am CEO and founder of Million Dollar Memoirs. And I appreciate that introduction because, yes, I was raised by two alcoholic parents and went through experiencing domestic violence with their alcoholism. And then that led me into making the choice of being in a relationship with a man with drug addiction. And and not only that, adolescence of being raped by two men who were brothers. And really finding myself through this journey. And I'm a single mom of a 24-year-old, and she is in Europe creating her own life. And my mission is really to help people to share their stories, to write their life stories, get it out to the world, and so that they inspire other people and for the healing purposes for themselves and for other people. So I love this space and what you're creating with the healing, and I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
We're grateful to have you, Kimberly. Thank you for being here. So we'll just, kick it off. We did hear you express that you, have experienced traumas in the early part of your life, at home with your parents. Was that something that, had always been that way for as long as you can remember, or was there some type of, extreme life change or something that, caused them to take to alcohol and things change and, your family dynamic?
No, I'm pretty sure it was like when I was conceived, if not before I was conceived. Because one of my first memories that I have is experiencing my father being with another woman, and I was in a hotel room with the two of them. And then I have another memory that I was always in bars with them, and we always lived somewhere centrally located. No joke, not even a mile. I mean, like across the street, if not living in the same building as a bar. And so one of the memories I also have is we lived across the street from a bar, and I was in the bar bathroom with this woman. And I don't know what was going on, and I don't know why she was with me in the bathroom. So, and this was like when I was 3 or 4 years old. Yeah.
And that's very early to still, remember, but that's kind of how it was, it was a moment. It was worth remembering. Now just, yeah, I guess getting older and kind of understanding that dynamic in a different light. Was it kind of in part to both of them, or was it just like a residual of, your father's infidelity? Did your mother have her issues with her as well?
Yeah, well, that was the whole thing. And I'm the youngest. My sibling is older than me, 7 years older than me. And so, even though we had two different childhood experiences, because my parents' alcoholism was in different phases because of our age gap, we both experienced feeling neglected, feeling abandoned, having parents who were relying on us emotionally to take care of them because we were more the parents than they were. And so, like my mom, It's quite interesting with how memories work because I have blocked out so much of my younger life. And now that I'm doing these podcasts and I'm sharing my story, it's starting to come back and more memories are unraveling as I speak. And like one of the things that came to me last year, and one of my best friends from childhood, who's my daughter's godmother, she remembers everything. So if I don't remember something, I can message her and get answers. And what we both remember is that when we were able to walk home from school, elementary school, I would ring the doorbell and the two of us would be at the front door waiting for my mom to answer the door because at the time she didn't work. She would open the door and slap me in the face. That's how I was greeted. So that's how she was handling the affair because she didn't know how to handle it other than drinking and taking it out on somebody else. And as a kid, I didn't understand what was happening. I just knew that my mom was hurting, and I knew that it felt wrong that I'm watching my dad with another woman, you know? I think
Wow.
that was your question. Did I answer your question?
No, you did, absolutely.
I
You
can
did.
I can only imagine, like, did that cause behavioral issues in school and you being around other folks? Did anyone see behavioral changes?
I don't believe so until later in elementary school. So, like, by the time I got into sixth grade and we were graduating from sixth grade, I brought a rated R movie into school because we were having a substitute teacher. And I thought that I was going to get away with it. I thought the teacher would actually do it. So, like, it manifested in that kind of way, but not like other kinds of ways, if that makes sense.
Just yeah, manifesting just different changes, you know.
Yeah.
So now that I completely understand. Now, being as though it seems like, your close friend was there for a lot of it, did, teachers or other parents, did anybody ever, like attempt to step in?
No, my second grade teacher was a God bless because I'm sure she was aware of something. But see, back in the 80s, teachers didn't really go into this kind of stuff, unlike, thank God they do today. I'm so grateful that teachers are really like grounded into being aware of households now and helping kids with especially domestic violence. But back in the 80s, they didn't do that. But the second grade teacher, she must have known that something was happening because I was always sad. I don't remember ever smiling. And in pictures, I looked miserable. I looked like I hate life in all my pictures. And so she supported me by she allowed me to take home papers and grade for assignments that we did. And then she let me like use stickers on the papers that we did. And she had me participate in that way because I clearly wouldn't go up in front of the students because I was afraid of being in front of other people. And I'm sure that's related to everything that was happening at home. So she supported me in ways to know what supported me the best was still participating and having me have some kind of confidence that I could be a part of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's
Yeah.
glad that she tried some strategies to help you to bring that life out of you.
Yeah.
Um, so leading, and we'll come back. I have another question. So from the childhood traumas of your parents abusing you with their alcoholism,
Mhm.
you also got raped at the age of 12 by
Mhm.
two brothers.
Yeah.
How did that come about? How were you put in that situation to be around them for that to happen?
This took me a while to connect the pieces. It felt like a puzzle that I couldn't quite figure out with how that led me to that place without that place of like beating myself up because it was wrong or right. And what I finally discovered is since my parents were always at the bar and I spent all of my childhood at bars with them, I became friends with one of their barfly friends' daughter. And so hanging out with her, she was just a little bit older than me. And so she met these guys. One was 16, one was 18. That's how I got into that circle, because I befriended her because they were already around my parents so much. And then it just worked out that I meet this 16 and 18-year-old, and the 18-year-old really screwed with me even more because it was a psychological thing, because I wanted a man to love me because I felt like I wasn't getting that from my father. Even though I knew my father cared about me, I felt like I wasn't getting that other piece of it, of that love. And so that 18-year-old went to the extent of, I'll take care of you, I'll take you away from your parents, I'll have you be safe. And it was all psychological and emotional, what I wanted. And so that was worse than his brother, who was 16, that I clearly remember him holding my hands down in the dirt because we were always like walking trails and outside in nature. I clearly remember my hands being held down and me saying no. And I remember how humiliating it was, because then we would, because all of us would be hanging out as a group. We'd go back to the group and he would be like that grin and that smirk of like he accomplished something, if that makes sense.
It definitely does. How did you find, yourself out of that situation? How did you get yourself out of that situation? When did everything kind of, click that you had to get out?
My sister was a godsend. I didn't want to listen to her, but she tried to sit me down one time and was like, this isn't good for you. This isn't safe. And nobody knew what was happening. But my ex-brother-in-law, her first husband, would follow me to try to figure out what was happening. Because at that point, I stopped going home at nights, and I would just like go away, and I would be near the river, and I'd be sleeping outside in a tent and all of this craziness with this 18-year-old. And so they were really trying to figure out what was happening. She tried to sit me down and tried to talk to me. I didn't want to listen. I was too wrapped up in it. She waited. They were still figuring out that he got smart enough that, I'm dating myself because we use the machines and the cassette tapes to leave the messages. And then he used those cassette tapes to record my phone conversations with this 18-year-old. So then they started figuring out that sex was involved. And then my sister sat me down again, and she's like, I really want you to listen to me. Like, I now know what's happening. Like, I don't know, but I know enough. And that it clicked for me, because at that point I was starting to go into 8th grade. And it didn't feel good when I went to school, because it felt icky and it didn't feel right. And I knew that this wasn't happening with other kids around me. So then I felt like I was different in some kind of context that I can't really explain at the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
So I did finally listen to her, and I told all of them that I was going to stop hanging out with them. And what he did is, we lived at the corner. It was a point, and there was a little bridge right across from the house. He, no joke, stood on that bridge with his arms crossed until I would come outside to confront me, because I stopped hanging out with them.
Wow. Wow.
And then he stalked me. Like, I started having nightmares because he would follow everywhere I go. He'd be there in his car because I was always walking. I was a kid. And I don't know how long that went on for, but the nightmares went on for a while.
And your parents weren't even there to protect you because of the drinking. What about the girl that introduced you from the bar? Did she know?
Like, I don't know if the two of them were having sex with all of us, but I know the 18-year-old was having sex with pretty much all of us.
So he was raping her too?
Yes. Yeah.
What? So not coming home at night, your parents didn't question you? They allowed you to stay out?
Well, honestly, it was like I had no rules. I never had any rules in the house. My father at that point he attempted to ground me. And that was a joke, because I waited 5 minutes and I walked out the door like, yeah, see ya. You're not grounding me. Bye.
Wow.
So I'm sure they felt like they had no control. And I didn't know as a 12, 13-year-old how dangerous it was. Because again, all I wanted was for a man, especially, to feel like I was feeling loved by him. And I was at the time. It was fulfilling what I was looking for. Even though I knew that it didn't feel good, it felt wrong, it felt icky. I was groomed. He would do the whole, let me touch your inner thigh, let me go down closer to your knee, let me, you know what I mean? Like, or from the knee
Yeah.
up. So, and I didn't know I was being groomed. Now, fast forward in my 40s, now I see that's what happens. That's what occurs.
So he preyed on your vulnerability of love, and took advantage of you and,
All of us.
and violated you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was a secret I carried with me for a long, long, long time. It was only in 2019 that I really started doing this deeper inner work on myself
Mhm.
and realized this was a secret that was really holding me back. So I felt shameful. I felt regret. I was beating myself up. It was holding me back from having a deeper connection, not only with men, but with people in general, because I didn't trust anybody, including people who loved me, because my parents didn't do anything. I reached out to him. He wanted to be Facebook friends with me, and I blocked him because I wasn't ready for any of that. I didn't want to see him, and I would see him around here, which was hard. And then in 2019, I unblocked him, reached out to him, and said, "You have been the longest secret of my life that I've been carrying around with me, and I'm ready to forgive you. I really want to have a conversation with you, and I want to let this go. I want to forgive you because I can't do this anymore."
And
And
what did he say in response to that? Did
his
he respond?
response is, "You want to forgive me?" He goes, "I am so sorry." He was like, I don't know if I could swear. Can I swear?
You can say whatever. This is unfiltered, unspoken.
He said to me, "I was such an asshole back then, and I apologize for everything that I did."
It only makes you wonder if traumas was happening to him.
Oh, I'm sure it was, because now I think back on it, his youngest brother was the one that raped me, like holding my hands down when I said no. But he had an older brother who I believe was involved in drugs, but I don't really remember that for 100% because everything was traumatic with what I was going through anyways. So I do believe that he was experiencing trauma within his family. So he was only doing what he knew. And who knows, maybe his brother did the same thing. And that was like what
Hmm.
was shown to him.
Yeah. And it's like sometimes we never know the depth of the traumas. But I definitely have been there. My vulnerability was love. And up until now, I'm really starting to work on that piece of my life, that vulnerability. So I know exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna jump into this. So I'm very big on folks realizing their childhood traumas and how their childhood traumas affect them.
Yeah.
So I want to elaborate a little bit on how did your childhood traumas affect your adult decisions?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I repeated the patterns. Because the night that I met my father came home. Well, my father and mother both came home drunk because they always drank together. It was like, they couldn't not go one without the other. And if they did, my father would get ticked off. So they both came home drunk that night. My dad smoked at the time and he forgot to get cigarettes and he blamed my mother. And I remember how infuriated he was. And he was yelling at my mother about her not getting him cigarettes. And so here I am, probably like 18, maybe 19. No, probably 18. I got in his face and was like, "No, you don't get to blame mom. It's your cigarettes. You didn't buy them. So you need to go out and get the cigarettes." And so we had words, we had an exchange, and he's drunk. And my mother is now trying to get in the middle of us because she sees that I'm like right in his face because I won't back off. And he tells me that he hopes I go to hell. So now I'm at the front door, ready to leave. And I turned around. Basically, I said, "Well, fuck you. I hope you go to fucking hell." And then I stormed out. I attempted to go see another girlfriend who was in college right around the corner. But, she was in college freshman year and she was meeting her friends and she had a circle. she was like partying a little bit. So I felt out of place because here I am, like extremely sad. I can't stop crying and I feel neglected again. I feel abandoned again. And so I went to a sandwich shop, and lo and behold, there's my daughter's father, because he just had that like narcissistic charisma that I was attracted to because I was unhealthy. And it
So
just
it
went from
willed
there.
you right on in.
Yep. It just
And
went
you
right
were
from
looking
there.
to be saved, and that's where your vulnerability of love kicked in again.
Yes. And
So
now I look back on it, he was stalking me because I didn't drive then. I took the city transportation, and he just happened to be on the same buses all the time. He just happened to be on the same bus stop all the time. And so then that connection started happening because now I'm seeing him everywhere. So we started talking more, and then it led to, exchanging a phone number because there was no cell phones back then. So there was no texting or anything. And then it just, before I knew it, I was pregnant at 20. And then right before I got pregnant, he started, because I was in denial of his drug abuse. I didn't even want to see it. He started taking my debit card and using that to go on drug binges for days. Now, you would think I wouldn't be able to deny that because now I have somebody who's betraying me. And that's where the pattern is again. A man who says he cares about me is betraying me, doing something that's so hurtful. And yet I still was in denial. I still didn't want to see it. So now I'm pregnant, and I don't, it's like out of control. I don't know what to do. And what I've learned is when you hear over and over so many times that you can't do anything without me, that nobody else is going to want you, and you hear that repeatedly, you believe it. And one of the things that I experienced with my dad was when he was drunk, he would never do this when he was sober. When he was drunk, he'd call me an asshole. And that's what I heard all the time. So here I have that voice, and I still have it. I'm 45. And there's times where I want to do something and it appears to be scary to me. And I've got that voice saying, "You're such an asshole. You're an asshole," or just asshole, because that's what I heard. And so,
you went into that normalized
yes,
what do they call it? Generational curse. So
yes,
that's what you attracted, was the man that you watched growing up is similar to the man that you ended up with, but with a separate addiction.
yeah. Emotionally
Okay.
unavailable and verbally abusive, mentally abusive. And now I was experiencing financial abuse because now he's taking money. And he did that consistently because there were so many times, even with the baby, my daughter, I couldn't pay rent because he would go and spend everything to go get his drugs.
And that's another thing. I'm glad you brought that up, Kim. Folks, I hope you're paying attention to what Kim is saying. Financial abuse is huge. It's probably one of the biggest things in domestic violence that comes a piece of it is
Yeah.
the financial abuse. So if you find that you're always paying for stuff, or you're paying almost all the bills in the house, and your significant other is either keeping their money, or they'll start a job, they'll quit a job, and all the financial responsibilities are on you. That is financial abuse. We're going to I have a question for you coming back in. We're going to chime back in. We're going to take a really quick 30
Can I
second
say
break.
something really fast before we break?
Yeah, absolutely.
What I also want to mention is what's important to me is when people hear domestic violence, let's break the habit that domestic violence is only physical abuse. I did not experience physical abuse. I never, even with alcoholic parents, I never experienced physical abuse. It was the emotional abuse that was the hardest. And if you
What's the
look at the
verb abuse?
science, when you look at the science, people with emotional abuse are experiencing the same PTSD symptoms as somebody who is physically abused. So I'm on a mission for people to get that domestic violence is not only domestic or physical abuse.
And Kim is absolutely right, because I didn't maybe here I didn't experience the physical abuse. It was verbal, emotional, financial
Yeah,
abuse, and in the end it became a physical abuse. So
yeah,
please listen to what Kim's saying. There is a list of different types of domestic violence. It is not just physical. So and another big one is control.
yes,
Control is abuse.
yeah.
So I have a when we get back, we're going to get a little bit deeper. Do not go anywhere. Welcome back. Welcome back. So, Kim, we always chat. Nothing is, you said nothing is off limits.
Yep.
Okay. So, through the piece of your you married him, ex husband, right?
Oh, I never married him.
Never married. Okay. So, your
Yeah.
ex, okay. So, no marriage. So, your ex, there's another piece to this. Kim didn't drive, but she was caught in some situations, and I'm going to let her elaborate on that because she knows where I'm going with this. So, can you tell folks some of the financial abuse that you went through, some of the verbal abuse that you went through? No, actually, let's just start with the financial abuse of it, and let's
Mhm.
start with the purchasing the vehicle.
Yeah. So when I had my daughter, he tweaked it so that it was, well, let me go get a job because there's times where I couldn't work, healing from having the baby, and that was a traumatic experience with how my daughter was born. So he tweaked it and manipulated it in such a way of, I can't go get a car because I don't have the credit to go get it and don't have the money. And so, what if you were to go get it? Because I was the one that was working. I had the full time job. I was the one that paid for our medical, all of that stuff. And we were on assistance at one point too, right? Because it's like, I wasn't making anything with retail work I was doing. So, what led to it is me buying a car, buying the insurance for the car, and it was for him to drive because I didn't have my license and I had no interest in learning how to drive a car at the time. I was completely content with taking city transportation because that's what I have been doing my entire life. So now it leads to, I don't know what he's doing because he's still using drugs. I'm still in denial about his drug use. And I believe he was just like going around using prostitutes and whatnot, because that led into a whole other situation. And so, and really what I didn't share with you when we chatted is that when I did leave the relationship and he was really mad that I left, he then took that car, he rammed into another car in front of a police department. So the car got impounded at this little village of where I was living at the time with family. And I ended up going to that because it's, again, in my name. I ended up going to the car at this impound where it was, only to find paperwork that he was arrested, he had drug paraphernalia, and he was using drugs at the time. And that's what led me to have some kind of rapport with the family court judge when I finally did have the courage to go to family court. Because when I went to family court, I was made out to be the bitch trying to keep my kid away from her father. Because also a tidbit of this, and I don't like using a lot of references to race because I don't believe in this whole race thing, because I believe we're all one, we're all connected. However, it was a manipulated system because he's African American. And so, me being white, there's an assumption that I was a bitch trying to keep my kid away from her father. And I was making up shit. until I had that paperwork that he was arrested with using drugs, having the drug paraphernalia. Then all of a sudden, don't you know, the judge turned around and was suddenly on my side.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's it's a flip because on the African American side, we look at it as the man is usually the judge usually sides with the opposite
Yeah.
opposed to the okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a different twist to it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you received a phone call from someone and this is a reason why you left him. Can you elaborate a little bit on that phone call?
Yeah, to rewind when I was just sharing that story about I now bought the car, got the car insurance, and he's out driving. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know where he is. I don't trust him. His mother calls me one night and says, what's going on? And I'm like, well, same old shit. I don't know where he is. I don't know what he's doing. He says he was delivering pizzas. That was bullshit because he didn't like to work. And that's work. He wouldn't get in the car, get out of the car, get out of the car, get out of the car. That's too much work. So she said to me, he's my son and I love him. And if you continue this, he's going to drag you down. And I want better for my granddaughter and I want better for you because you deserve better. So yes, I love him and I'm always going to support my son. And I really want you to leave because I don't want him dragging you down. So she gave me permission. So I hung up the phone. I get goosebumps when I talk about it because I picked up the phone, called my mom, and I know my mom had been waiting for that call. And I packed up some Pampers. I packed up some of my things I needed and she picked me up and I never went back. But it was a hell of a ride for 16 years with him after that.
16 years. That's a long
Yeah.
time. That
Yeah.
is a long time, Kim.
15 years, and what I know of is 2 other baby mamas.
Wow.
There's probably other baby mamas, but I don't know of any others.
So he was messing around. Did you know that he was messing around on you?
Well, when I finally left, I adored his mother. She was a sweetheart. She had the biggest heart. She was so kind and so caring. And she was a single mom. So again, we're talking about trauma. What I finally got in 2019-ish, 2018, is how traumatic his life was. And that he was only doing because he only knew what he knew in his life. Like, you don't know what you don't know. So, wow, I just lost my thought. Where was I going with that?
You had the cutest mother. It's okay. It's okay.
I get so into this, and then I was like, "Whoa!" I still don't know where I was going with it.
I if he knew if he was cheating on you.
Oh my goodness! Wow, no, I totally lost it. It just went away.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. So, when you moved out, so your mom actually finally, your mom that abused you as a child was going through, had, I guess, been through the recovery stage. So she was actually able to open her doors back up to you. How
Well,
long did
it was
how
an
long?
interesting dynamic between me and my mom because yes, she's an alcoholic, and
Mhm,
yes, she had an addiction, and I always knew my mom had my back, and it
mhm,
was in a dysfunctional way. Because again, I'd always get into my father's face. I went back down and she'd be the mediator more or less between us. So I had that feeling of, okay, I know she's got my back. And
mhm,
that felt like love to me because I knew that she would never allow him to hit me or anything like that. And he would never, anyways. One time he did throw his hand in my face, and that was
mhm,
scary, but he didn't actually move forward with it. So it was a dysfunctional dynamic between us.
mhm,
And I knew, and I see now because of where I am now, my 24-year-old, she knew I was hurting and she was scared for her granddaughter. So she didn't want me going through all of that. And my mom drove me crazy because she would never tell me what to do. She would let me go through everything that I went through and listen to me. She was an amazing listener. And it drove me crazy because I'm like, why can't you just tell me what to do? You're my mother.
also going through a lot of traumas as well. So I think that back in the day, that mental piece of it, she probably, I mean, it probably was best. Sometimes it's good for folks just to listen to us. That so
Well,
that
that's
we
the
have
whole
that.
thing.
Yeah.
She didn't, and when I finally, to fast forward a little bit, when I did write my life story,
Hmm.
she was the piece that I wrote first because of
Hmm.
our relationship and what I experienced with her. And
Hmm.
I went into my genealogy, and what I discovered is it goes back into a long decades lineage of grief and loss and not having coping skills, because my grandmother was only a baby when her mother died.
Hmm.
By the time my grandmother was 16, her entire family died. She had nobody. So, of
Wow.
course, she didn't know how to be a mother to my mother. And she was very critical to my mother. She was very hurtful, emotionally neglected her. So, I finally understood, now that my mother's passed, I finally understand why she was always at arm's length. But I could get to her just a little bit, and then she
Yeah.
would pull away from me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, that's how traumas were dealt with. It
Yeah.
was like isolated. They dealt with traumas, but as we know, that causes so many mental issues, and it causes us to get in abusive relationships that some folks just don't leave; they stay. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I
Okay.
was listening to a podcast tonight when I was in the car,
Hmm.
and I'm going to do more research on this. But what the woman was saying is domestic violence was only started to be discussed in the 70s. So
Yeah,
it hasn't been that many years. It's
yeah,
new, and they still don't know things about it. And that's why I was saying that point about domestic violence is not only physical abuse, because they still don't talk. There's a stigma around the fact that emotional abuse is domestic violence.
well,
Because
in certain states, it was legal to beat your wife. So
yeah,
you couldn't
exactly.
get locked up. Not until the 70s they changed that law. So
Exactly.
yeah, so a lot of folks don't know that, but it was legal to beat your wife, and
Yeah.
law enforcement wouldn't do anything about it until the domestic violence started getting even more serious.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
There's another piece to this. If you don't want to talk about it, you can shush me.
I'm an open book.
Okay. Your ex did something else that put you through even more traumas, and you took every measure to protect your daughter, but the system was failing you. Can you
Mm.
tell the audience a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when I did leave, and like I was saying, I went through a struggle with family court. They allowed him unsupervised visits. And so there was an arrangement made. I got a very simplistic order of protection, had to keep away for like 500 feet, and then was only date timed. And so I kept having to go back to get that renewed. So, with that in mind, it had to be a certain location that we would meet for the drop off and the pickup. And then he'd have her overnight, and then I'd pick her up the next day. So this one time I dropped her off at this location. She slept over his house. I worked that day. So,
And as she's saying her, she's talking about her little daughter. So
oh, yes.
I want
Thank you.
I want folks to understand that she's talking about a 2 years old, right? A
Yeah, she was a year and a half when I left him. So this was
year.
about 2.5, 2,
Yes.
maybe 3. It was somewhere between 2 and 3 years old that
Okay.
she was now going to an unsupervised visit with her father. And so this one day, I worked all day. The location for the pickup was right near my job. A friend of mine, a coworker, she offered to drive us home. So that meant that we were going to take one of the shuttle buses to get to this woman's car. So I go to location, I pick her up, my daughter. We go to get on the shuttle bus, and she wouldn't sit down. And I'm trying to sit her down, and then she starts crying to me. I'm hurting. It hurts. I can't. So I finally get her calmed down, get her on my lap, and I'm thinking more like common sense things, like, okay, maybe it's a vaginal infection, maybe it's a UTI. Like, I'm thinking those kinds of things. So immediately the next morning, I called the pediatrician. I quickly learned that day it's never a good thing when 2 pediatricians come in to look at your daughter's private area. Then They grab me out of the office, and now my daughter is with the pediatricians. They grab me out. I go into the counselor's office, and they tell me that they already called the police and they already called Child Protective because they suspected that he molested her, and they couldn't figure out exactly how the molestation happened, but they suspected that he used at least a finger because that wouldn't have done too much trauma to that area to show of what occurred, if that makes sense. And so then now I get to go to like the sexual assault center that she gets to go to. The police department did an investigation with me to investigate if I had any part in this, which was common, makes sense. And then they were hoping she was going to act this out with dolls and that kind of play with these people who specialized in this. And so he was put through 3 lie detector tests. And because he was high on drugs each time, he once fell asleep during it, and he was inconclusive the other 2 times. So the entire thing was inconclusive. So it was not founded at all. Like nothing was ever said, yes, that it happened or anything. And so then when we're in the middle of all of this investigation and bringing her to the sexual assault center, I'm going to family court to try to stop these unsupervised visits because I don't want my kid having to go to be exposed to this. The family court judge told me that if I did not bring her to an unsupervised visit, I would be held in contempt. So I don't know how many more visits I had to bring her because I didn't want to have that challenge on top of everything else I was going through. So each time that she went to an unsupervised visit from that point, my mom would drive us to the hospital. I'd have her go to the ER and have them take a look at her just to make sure that nothing else had happened and that it wasn't occurring more. And it was just a one-time thing of what had happened.
Wow. I hope everyone is listening to this. Please make sure that you're taking this serious. We're talking about a 3-year-old and her dad, and the system is failing the mom even after the evidence that was provided.
Somewhere in between this too, they had us seeing a mediator, but I would have to be face to face with this man who was abusing me and now abusing my daughter. And this mediator was supposed to resolve whatever conflict was going on between us, but nobody would acknowledge that he was using drugs. So he would come high to the sessions for the mediation. On top of now this investigation is going on for molestation, and he still has unsupervised visits. It was just a craziness of a period of time going through all of that and managing it and keeping my daughter safe.
So how long did the visitations go on after after the incident that happened?
I've blacked that piece out, so I don't remember how many had happened. I finally got a full order of protection for the 2 of us until she was 18 years old, when they took away the unsupervised visits. And they wanted him to go to get a mental health evaluation, and they wanted him to have all of that stuff done, which means he would have to pay for it. And he was always in poverty because he didn't want to work and he was having this drug addiction. And that day in court, when they took away the unsupervised visits, again, I didn't drive. So I left the courthouse and I went my way that I'm very habitual, apparently, because I always do my same route of where I walk and what bus I take. He followed me from as soon as we got away from the courthouse. He started following me, right, tailing me on my back. And he was screaming things out on the street about how I had a threesome with drug dealers and calling me all kinds of names like whore and a bitch and just nonsensical things screaming out in the street. Now, I grew up here, so a lot of people know my family and know me. So it was I felt shamed because I know people know me and know my parents. And so I was smart enough to go on to a busier street so that people were near me and around. And then I panicked because he was getting way too close to me because he was still following me right on my back. And I stopped and I was going to cross the street and I was going to go into a bar that my parents always frequented. And I knew the people at the bar. So I went to stop and cross the street. And all of a sudden, he's right in my face. He looks me dead in the eyes and said, "If I had a gun, I'd shoot you."
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you
So
did you did you get him for violating the restraining order?
well, they would never violate them. Like that was just so ridiculous with that whole thing. But I did duck into a business after that, and he walked away. And then I went to the police and I did a report for that. And that's when family court gave me the full order of protection until she was 18 years old with that threat.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, we're going to take a
Yeah.
really quick break and we're going to come right back. We have all the trauma piece. Now we want to hear the healing piece and the
Yeah.
measures that you have taken to go through your healing process.
Yeah.
We'll be right back in about 30 seconds. Welcome back. Welcome back. So, I want to, if you can give the audience, because you have went through a lot of traumas, if you can give the audience, a few tips on ways that you took to get out of this situation to start your healing journey, some tips on what
Mhm.
they can do to help them.
Well, it really has been a long journey because I I became aware by the time my daughter was in elementary school that codependency was very much in my life. That clearly I'd been codependent
Mhm.
with anybody, any relationship that I had, because even after I left him, I then dated a man who was using drugs. That again, I was in denial about it. And then he hit my daughter's father in the face with a hammer. And that's when everything shifted for me because now all of a sudden I got to go be in front of a grand jury for the man that I'm dating who hit my daughter's father in the face with a hammer. And so
Wow.
then at that moment, I started figuring out like, how am I going to take responsibility for everything that I created? And on my 25th birthday was very significant. With my daughter being 24, I told her this is a possibility for her. On 25th birthday, I literally woke up that morning and it was like a huge light bulb just went off because it was all of a sudden, what am I doing with my life? I had started school way before I met him, and I was immature and I was frustrated about the whole thing. So I never did anything more with it. So it's like, okay, I get to go back to school because now I have a kid that's in elementary school. And if anything, I just want her to know the principle of getting it done, what you start. And who am I having around my kid? Why am I dating this man who's hitting my daughter's father in the face with a hammer? Now, granted, I had a lot of hatred for him at the time. And I still did not want him to experience something like that because I don't feel like anybody deserves that kind of thing. So I started figuring out that piece. But then, however, I met my ex, who I just left 4 years ago. And this is something that I want to share because what I did is I convinced myself it wasn't domestic violence because he didn't drink, he didn't use drugs. He was financially secure. He was willing to take care of my daughter. However, he was a workaholic. He was still emotionally unavailable. What he was willing to do was give money all the time, give gifts. That's what he learned because he also experienced trauma. So when I finally realized in 2017-ish, 2016, now my daughter is in Europe for 2 weeks because she went on a trip to study interior design in Florence, Italy. Now, all of a sudden, I'm looking at things from the perspective of, wow, I am in a domestic violence relationship. he doesn't have to drink. He doesn't have to be using drugs, because I still repeated the pattern of emotionally unavailable man who was still neglecting me to some points that I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel loved. And what I was doing was repeating that pattern that the man was taking care of me financially, because my dad was the breadwinner of the family. And my dad was the one I'd go to for money. So I repeated that pattern all over again. So to get out of all of that, I took the courage to leave that relationship after almost 14 years. And now again, my daughter is now in college in Italy. And so now I'm going through that huge transition of what it is to be a mom as an empty nester, because now she's off to college and in another country. And now I have this awareness of this relationship is not serving me. I'm repeating patterns that are not healthy. This is not going to get me anywhere in life other than to still feel like that hurt little child. I was still living from that place of hurt little 5-year-old Kimmy. So until I was willing to take that brave step of leaving that comfort of that 13-year relationship with a man who was very familiar to me and those old patterns of what it was to be in a relationship and to have a man in my life, until I was willing to do that, nothing was going to change. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot. Hey, I'm with it makes a lot of sense to me. So, um, you know, it's a lot of folks in denial about their traumas, and this is the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing, is to bring awareness so folks can hear what you have to say and the traumas that you have been through, and hopefully
Yes.
someone will connect with Kim and her situation. Maybe you're going through the exact same thing as Kim. Please take her life experience. Maybe it'll help you take that first step to uh, acknowledging the traumas that you're going through, and then you will be able to confront them, and then you will be able to cope with them. So you're
Yes.
doing some wonderful things, Kim. You just quit your job last year. Can you tell us a little bit about your business and what you're doing? Because someone may be watching here and you can provide a service to them.
Yeah, I would love to. And I don't want to forget that as a gift to your listeners, I have a free ebook that if they go to my website, they can click on the free ebook, and it's 5 ways to recover from your personal trauma. So there's some steps in there, but what are some ways, the basic 101 of beginning to heal your trauma? Because I know for me, it was scary to think of what is it going to look like. There was so much uncertainty, so much unknown. And so these are some basic steps to help you to start that healing process. And I left my job. I did what I was supposed to. I listened to my mom. She knew that I was going to be a single mom. She had that vision of that happening when I was still in denial, and led me to working for the government. And that provided security, that I had the benefits for us. I had the security of the full-time job, the income, which led me to be able to leave her father and to secure my own financial, even though I didn't feel like I was doing that on my own. I did it for 20 years, like 21 years actually. Then I came to realize when I went into a coaching program, I don't need to do this job anymore. It's not fulfilling. I'm working with people that I don't like pretty much. I'm doing a job that feels stressful. I know it's going to shorten my life. I know this is not going to lead me to what I really want to be doing with my life, because I really want to be helping people to heal. And so I decided to leave it. And that's when $1 Million Memoirs was created. And my whole thing is, when I was a little girl, a very close person in my life passed. And that was the first book that I wrote was about that passing of that loved one. And so I felt lost. I felt unsure about what the purpose of life was with having this loss as such a little girl. That's why this is so important to me, that people get that they are worth sharing their story to other people, because one of the obstacles I had was, who's going to want to read my story? There's so many people out there dealing with alcoholism. There's so many of us dealing with domestic violence. Who's going to care about my story? I'm not famous. I don't live an extravagant life. And that's so not true. We all have stories, and through those stories, we all have lessons to share with other people, because when we teach those lessons, when we share those lessons, it inspires somebody else who was like us in those situations to have that sudden inspiration of, maybe there's something else for me. Maybe I don't have to live this way. Maybe I can be in a relationship that is soul fulfilling and loving and deep. So that's what I'm up to. I'm on a mission to help people to write their stories and get it out to the world. And on the website too, they can book a discovery call with me for memoir writing. And so that's free, also with the free ebook. And yeah, I'm really on a mission like you to help people to heal and help others to move through that process as well.
I love it. I love it. Is there any other advice that you can give the audience, maybe on some red flags, especially if they're, I think a lot of folks don't see the addiction piece of it. I think that's probably more of about a vulnerability of someone with an addiction to come at you with all the right things to say, to smooth over, to fill their void that they need. Can you tell folks how to look out, because you went from 2 addiction relationships? So what are signs? What were the signs? Can you tell folks the signs to look for, so that if they get put in that situation, they know what to look out and they can avoid or run away?
You know, honestly, I feel like what's more important to me to share is not the red flags, but the importance of listening to your body. Because when we've been in traumatic experiences, we learn to disassociate from ourselves. We learn to disconnect from our bodies. And that's where the trust piece comes in. And so when you're willing to take a look at the situation of what you're living, and you can then sense what's happening in your body, you can then take a look at, what is that speaking to me, and why is that happening? And is it because I'm in this relationship that I feel like I don't have freedom? I feel like I'm not being heard. I'm not being seen. I feel unloved. And when you begin to not disconnect, but step away from what you're experiencing, then you can have a different perspective on it. And the other piece that I want to emphasize, because I now see how I intuitively went to it, was asking others for help. So in 8th grade, I went into a counselor's office and said, something is different about my home. Because I knew when I went to other people's homes, now some of my childhood friends had one parent that was a drinker. So there was some familiarity in that. But the older I got, up to 8th grade, I was now being around other kids whose parents didn't live like that. And so I went to the counselor and I said, I need help. I don't know what is going on at home. I don't know why it's different. And I wasn't yet willing to talk to someone about the experience of being raped by 2 men, because in 8th grade, I also did an AIDS test, which was huge in that time of the 80s, where they didn't understand AIDS. They were blaming it on the homosexual community. But I was terrified as an 8th grader, because now I knew that these 2 men were having sex with me, raping me, and I didn't know if I would have AIDS. So I took a test secretly. Nobody knew. And so that was traumatic. So now I go into high school, and my counseling went right into high school. And if I did not have a counselor to go to, especially every Monday, because weekends were the worst, I would not have graduated high school. So it's imperative to be willing to ask others for help. Go to somebody who is a professional, who you trust, that will listen to you, that you know is confidential, or go to someone who is living that life that you want, that they will listen to you and they will offer something like guidance, just so that you're connected to what is it that you want, and somebody is already experiencing it. Oh, you're muted.
look, I didn't unmute myself. Very powerful. I hope folks are listening to Kim and some of the signs of what folks are going through and the body language. She spoke heavy on how do you feel about
Yeah.
the situation, more so opposed to the red flags. Because I'm like, look at the red flags, but that was a powerful piece of it too, is body language. And also go with your gut feeling. If your gut is
Yes.
saying something, then
Yeah.
your gut is probably telling you don't do it.
Thank you
We
for
are
saying that, because that's exactly what I was getting to, is listen to your gut. Your gut is your intuition, and that will never fail you.
Yeah, because we abuse ourselves as well as
Yes.
being abused, accepting the traumas when we're sitting there crying and like, what are they doing? We're putting
Yeah.
our stuff through ourselves through traumatic abuse as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah.
I want folks to know that as well.
Yeah.
Kim, we're at time, but
Yeah.
we're running your information at the bottom. I just want to make sure that we have everything right. And if not, can you give folks additional information where to contact you at?
No, that's perfect with the website and the Facebook. And they
Okay.
can email me right on the website. They can connect with me through there too.
Okay. And Kim is very responsive. She is really into life experiences. So, Kim, after this, if you can please post information in the Good Fight chat group resources so folks can contact you and reach you. That is what the platform is for. So,
Absolutely.
anyone going through life experiences, the Good Fight is sharing life experiences. Unfiltered, Unspoken is an extension of the Good Fight. We are sharing life experiences to help others going through similar situations in hopes that someone will connect. If you don't connect, someone may connect with you. It could go either way. You never know who you may help with a life experience. And it is showing that it is working. So
Yeah.
I am so thrilled about the platform of the Good Fight because it has definitely helped me. I'm gonna tie it up. Kim has some very go with how you feel, your emotions. Um, Kim held traumas in all up until 2018. So, that is recent. So she carried rape with her from 12 up until 2018, 19, right?
Yeah.
2019. We're not going
19.
to disclose Kim's age, but that's a long
Well, I said
time.
that anyways in the session that I'm in my 40s.
Yeah, look, but that's a long time to carry abuse. But I know how you feel because I carried abuse from childhood up until about a year and something ago. So we're
Yeah.
definitely in the same boat on
Yeah.
that. And deal with your life traumas and connect with someone, as she said, a counselor, someone that may be going through traumas,
Mm-hmm.
someone close. You do not have to go through this alone. And childhood traumas do affect your adult decisions. And Kim is a living testimony of that. She watched abuse as a child, and she got even worse abusive relationships as an adult. So I
Yeah.
hope everyone is listening to what Kim had to say. Please share, tag someone, like, comment. Let's keep the cycle going of helping others through life experiences. Kim, I want to thank you for coming on to Unfiltered, Unspoken. We definitely will be chatting further about other things. I truly appreciate your testimony. And, I wish you so many blessings and still in the healing process because you never fully heal.
You
When
don't.
you endure traumas, there is no fully healing. We will always carry these traumas with us, but you
Yeah.
can take those shackles off and start a journey of a free life.
Yes. Yes. Thank
Okay.
you for having me. It really means a lot to me to be here and to be with you and to be in this community. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And thank you. And thank you for all the support with the Good Fight platform.
Oh, of course.
Yes. So make sure y'all tune in. Next Sunday, we will be going live again at 7 p.m. ET. Thank you, Kim. I love you,
Thank you.
sis.
Love you too.